Hello again.
We're cooking some salsa. So Mr. Carlos is making a basic tomato salsa, and I'm making a peach and jalapeno salsa. So I've cut up the peach, and Mr. Carlos cut up some purple onion. And we use purple onion in, or red onion in salsa because it's a little bit sweeter and it's not as sharp. And so Mr. Carlos is cutting up some tomato. So how are you doing that, Mr. Carlos?
Well, for any salsa, you got to make sure that you're cutting very small pieces, because if you're chewing and you get a big piece, it can become a little uncomfortable. So it's a definite test of knife skills.
Plus, you want the piece to fit on a chip. I'm doing the jalapeno, so I've cut the top off of it. When you're doing a jalapeno at home, you want to make sure that you are being careful, because the seeds on the inside are where the oil is, and if you touch them a lot, then you'll have oil on your hands, and then if you touch your face, you can be pretty much in pain.
And it is very hot.
Demonstration, please.
So I generally cut the seeds away from the edge of the jalapeno, and you really should use a smaller knife. I just have that one beside me.
Now what Mrs. Mamer is doing right here with the spoon, that's actually a very quick way to get rid of the seeds so you don't miss any.
So then we've got a clean jalapeno. The heat of the jalapeno is in the seeds. So if you want to add more heat to the salsa, then you'd add a few seeds, and that would heat that salsa up quite a bit, make it a little bit more spicy. So I'm just going to do that to the other side of the jalapeno as well, kind of cutting along that white piece so that you can kind of flip it out and just peel the seeds right out. Okay. Now again, be careful with your hands, because even if you think you've washed them, this oil stays on your hands for quite some time.
So as soon as you're done cutting the jalapeno, it's actually a very good idea, wash your hands right away. Mm-hmm. And by all means, do not touch your face with the oils on your hand. You'll feel it right away.
So I'm going to chop my jalapenos a lot smaller than my actual peach, just so that you don't get a big chunk of jalapeno, because that would actually really be quite a spicy bite.
Okay, so cilantro. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I'm going to be cutting up next is going to be some cilantro. This is a wonderful herb. Now, Mrs. Mamer and I were discussing cilantro earlier. Now, I'm a huge fan of cilantro, but it's one of those things, it's like, you can't go wrong with it. You really can't. It adds a nice licorice flavor to the food, but it's one of those acquired tastes.
I do not have that acquired taste. So I actually do not like cilantro in things, and I would leave it out normally, but because we're making this and following a recipe, it calls for cilantro, and so we're going to put it in there.
So when you're making salsa, there's definitely a lot of knife skills, but Mrs. Mamer, is there a quicker way to do this?
There is. If you have a really good food processor at home, you could throw the ingredients one at a time into the food processor, and that would actually process the food. But it would make it a little bit more mushy. For a tomato salsa, you might want to be a little bit more careful that it's not super wet tomatoes or super ripe tomatoes, because then you get a ton of juice in there.
Yep. Now here's a little tip. When you're cutting tomatoes, make sure you put them in the fridge just before you cut them. In a way, that'll make sure that the liquid in the tomatoes is a little bit more solid. Because if you're trying to cut a tomato that's completely liquid, it's like cutting a water balloon.
Actually, if you put onions in the fridge before you cut them as well, they don't react as bad with your eyes. Okay, so I've got the jalapenos done. I'm going to add them to my salsa and mix them up. And then the last thing I have to add is, vegetable-wise, is the cilantro.
Yeah, so salsas are pretty straightforward. Just cut up whatever you like, really. Toss it in a bowl, make sure it's edible sizes, and that's it. Ready for some cilantro?
Are you good for in yours? Do you want to put that in there?
I can put this in there.
Okay.
one thing that's nice about salsa, it is very colorful.
It's a really nice fresh part of a meal.
Actually, hand me some. Just cut some over here.
Alright, so I'm going to add a 1/4 cup approximately of fresh lime juice, which I'm not actually going to use fresh. We had some left over from foods class, and so we're going to use that. And then I'm going to add some red pepper flakes as well into this salsa. We add the lime juice just to keep everything the right color so it doesn't brown, and then also it gives it a nice like zesty flavor. Okay. And try to use this bottle up. Ooh. The red pepper flakes are also spicy, so you just got to be careful with that.
So the nice thing about salsa, the heat that we're adding, it's totally to taste. So it's one of those things, start experimenting at home. The problem is if you add too much heat, it becomes unedible. So that you really don't want that. So my tip for you guys is when you're starting to add like Tabasco or red pepper flakes, or even working with jalapenos, start with a very small dose. Okay, you don't want to overdo it on your first try.
And taste as you go with salsa, because that's how you're going to know whether you've got it or not. So whether you're at the point where you can stop adding things, or if you need to add a little bit more. So I'm going to add just a little bit of salt, like a pinch of salt, and then I'm pretty much done.
Okay. You didn't need any tomatoes with that, did you?
Nope.
Nope.
Just peaches. This is going to be a really sweet salsa. So you could eat this with chips, or you could also eat this with like a teriyaki pork or a steak and have it kind of on the side and then eat the meat with this. And that would taste really good too.
It's really a nice summer thing to have. Something very simple, something very quick. Okay. So here is a tomato base for the salsa. Next is you add a little cilantro in there. Okay. And then some, I've already pre-cut some onion. So always make sure you have the right size bowl. Obviously I picked the smaller bowl. Okay, and did you use that spoon for the jalapenos? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'll do jalapenos over here. For you?
So all you have to do is just put all the ingredients in the bowl, mix a little. See how colorful that is? Yeah, like for me personally, I like a little bit of tang to it, but I also like a little bit of heat. So I'm a big fan of using the purple onion for this, or red onion, as you would say. I don't know why they call it red onion.
I don't know either.
It looks more purple. See? Okay, and then I'm adding a little bit of Tabasco just for flavoring. Once again, if you're working with heat, definitely know what you're doing. Start with a little bit. Don't overdo it.
I got your jalapenos here.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So once again, this is a great compliment for tortilla chips, especially.
Or if you have Taco Tuesdays.
Yep.
A fresh salsa is always better than a bought one.
At least with a fresh salsa, you know exactly what's in it.
That's true.
And it's not as runny. Like, you ever buy salsa from a jar and you swear it's all soupy?
Can I grab it there?
Yep. Oh, that's right.
You want the other one?
No, I think this is good.
Okay.
See, we have the colors involved in there. Kind of looks like the Mexican flag. That does, red, white, and green. A little geography lesson.
And add the salt.
Yeah, just a touch. A little here. So now what Mrs. Maymer is adding is a little bit of cumin.
It's kind of the spice that's in taco meat. So it makes it just have that little bit of, I don't know, familiar flavor. And then a little bit of salt. Did you add any lime or anything?
Nope, I haven't.
Do you want it?
Yeah, just a touch.
I'll just empty this in.
Yeah. So salsa is definitely one of those things where you can actually work on developing your palate. Okay, this looks ready.
There.
Okay, so all you. Oh.
So two different salsas.
Yeah.
So peach, jalapeno, and tomato.
So all you need to do is just put these in small bowls, get your chips ready, and you're ready to rock.